why is it like say the end of the world 2012 say, and why is it there's always a picture of the pyramids? If they were built, are they built by humans or were they put there by someone else?
Well, that's the one thing that confuses me is like when I watched like heaps of theories on it and studied up on
It's
it, like,
always
just
a
out
pyramid.
of curiosity. It's because like there are so many phenomenons with it. For instance, like you've got the big granite boxes that are on the inside that are just completely solid boxes that have been hollowed out for the bodies to be put in. But the boxes are twice as wide than the doorways and tunnels that they've got them through to the base of that pyramid. And there is no way they could just make those tunnels wider and then put them back in. There's no physically possible way of doing it.
Well, they found out that building it was actually possible. Building it was actually possible. Just the way they built it. They built it in corners. But the issue, see, this is I'll tell you the part where it's like, okay, we can understand this, and I'll tell you the part where they're like, well, we can't understand this. So the part where they could understand was the way they built it was they built it in corners. Every corner was like a transition. It was like a railroad track, and as they get to a corner, it picks up the block, turns it, and then they drop it down again, and they transition. And the way they built it, I believe, was from the bottom up kind of thing. But they started, it was corners, okay? And I know that that's how they did it. But the part where they don't understand is how did they manage to lug them across from miles away, like far, far away. Bring them there. And not only that, they had them perfectly leveled. Like if you put a level on it, it's perfectly leveled. And then the way they carved it out and sketched it or whatnot, it was perfectly designed. So it's like, how did they manage to do that with primitive tools?
You know, and they weren't they aligned to the point certain way and everything.
And the way they're aligned too is they sit under Orion's belt, the 3 stars each.
Exactly. Yeah, something like that.
Exactly.
So I guess they had a huge correlation with the stars, and back then everybody loved the stars, because I mean, if you didn't have a book and you're trying to learn stuff and you just looked up into the sky, you saw stars and you're like, what the heck does that even mean? I mean, look at the Mayan pyramids, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, but yeah, so they had the Orion's belt was pretty crucial, and it showed them when the winter solstice was going to start, kind of thing. So they knew how to harvest their crop. That's basically the whole idea behind that. Whether it had to do with aliens, I don't know. Do I think aliens exist? Yes. Do I think we'll ever come in contact with them? No, not anytime soon. And why is that? Because, well, think about this. The nearest star to us is like a couple of 100 light years away. That means you would have to be traveling at the speed of light for years just to get to it. At the speed of goddamn light, bro. Can you freaking... Dude, even the speed of sound travels slower than the speed of light. Can you imagine that? The speed of sound travels slower than the speed of light. And yet, when I talk right now, think about it. When you're talking, you just open your mouth, the word comes out, and you already heard it. Can you imagine moving faster than that? Much faster, like a significant amount faster?
Because I'm in Scotland, when I speak, you hear me straight away in Canada. That freaks me out.
Like your brain processes it right away too.
Yeah. Phones,
so think about that.
So
think about that for a minute. It's a couple of 100 light years. Okay, it's a couple of 100 light years away. That's the nearest star, and we don't even know if that star has a viable solar system around it where life exists on one of those planets. We don't even know that. So how can you think? And now you're like, well, what about DooM? What about like Star Trek DooM? Star Trek.
What about Wally? What about Wally?
Star Trek. Well, think about it. Do you honestly think your body can sustain that much pressure of speed? Nope. Do you honestly think if you were to travel at the normal speed of light, or normal speed, like the fastest we can travel, up to a point where we can travel, where you can sustain life and not be crushed by the speed, do you really think you can survive at travels like that without being fed food or something? So there are theories of like, well, what about we find the best one? The best one is we find like a wormhole or something, you know, and it's like
a black hole. Yeah.
Do you think black holes exist?
Yes, they do.
Yes.
But you would die as you come in contact. I'll explain that in a sec. But then, so you would get warped. You would get warped through the wormhole or something like that through time. Or the other theory is, why don't we just put you in a coma You know what I mean? Put you in a coma and then wake you up when you get closer, so your body doesn't use all the resources it needs. It works slower. And that one, maybe. But who's controlling the damn plane?
Yeah,
but
true.
also consider
who would waste their life traveling just to get to a place where
even though
most likely that's probably what's going to happen.
Doesn't mean what's going on in the spaceship. You know.
Most likely that's what's going to happen with us. We're going to start off with robots that are going to land there. Something like Mars. We're going to have something like Mars. We'll send robots there.
Have you seen those pictures from Mars? Those panoramas?
Yeah, they're pretty
but
cool.
Think of generations like.
In the future, maybe. I'm not saying it's impossible.
Like
I'm just
people
saying right
live
now,
on
it's
it
just
and
not
travel.
possible.
You know what I mean? Their parents made the decision, and and they breed, and you know what I mean. But think of all the time just to get there.
Yeah, true.
We'll start off with like robots.
And then come back.
Dude, we'll start off with robots before we send a human.
Do you think a robot could have their own mind and think what they want to think?
Oh, that's actually interesting. Like
iRobot,
God.
you know how they break out the whole controlling thing, and they pretty much think for themselves and they think bad.
Matrix, right?
Yeah.
The robot that can.
If that's possible, I want a Wally right now.
Well,
carry on.
So the moral thing is not if that's possible, but if we should make them.
I don't think we'll be able to do it until we fully understand the brain, and we still have a shit ton of learning of the brain to do. Because, why do I say this? Let's look at, first of all, you got to look at the brain. Just simply, I'm not talking about what the brain does and how it just works with everything, because if you already know, you obviously already know the brain is fucking phenomenal. But let's talk about just the movement. What's involved for movement? You might think it's pretty simple. Well, I just move my hand and bam, my hand moves, right?
Yep.
It's actually a lot more complicated. And your brain is really breaking its balls for movement.
But also,
if you
remember...
Look at this. Just your cerebellum, which is at the back of your brain. So I want you to reach out and touch something in front of you. Just reach out and touch it. Whatever, like a pencil, a joystick, whatever. Just, hey look, I'm holding my joystick. Just reach out and grab something, you know what I mean?
I just touched a can of soda.
Yeah, well, you see, when your hand goes in that motion, that straight motion, that's actually amazingly controlled by your brain, because your cerebellum, if you damage it, if you damage your cerebellum, what ends up happening is your hand starts doing like a snake trying to reach down to your joystick or whatever. It doesn't go straight. Because what it's reading is it's using, not only is it using visual cues to know where your hand's moving, to like say to itself, hey look, this is my hand, this is an object, it's moving to this object, it's going to touch it. It's taking visual cues. It's also taking somatic sensory, which is what you touch, you're feeling, like you're touching something with your hand, those neurons that tell you, hey look, you finally touched it. It's also taking that, and it's also taking your perception of space. Like where you are in space, where you are in your environment, like you're sitting on your chair, right? So it takes that into consideration. If you destroy that, think about how your brain is going to go. It's going to be like, whoa, what do? I don't know which one's which, and I don't know what to... So that's just a simple movement. And let's not forget the part of your brain that says, hey, I want to move, and the other part that says, move these muscles. You know what I mean? Look at all that parts right there. All of that just for a simple movement. So and that's why when they're making robots, the robot moves all jittery and stuff and has all these wires and stuff. It's just because of that movement they're trying to get down. So it's not a simple task. It's not easy. And let alone can we figure out how robots... you'd have to make the robot need an energy source that it can replenish itself without having to... Like food. Like our energy source is food, right? It needs to have an energy source that can replenish itself without... dying, kind of thing.
So
and
like
repair it needs
fuel?
And let's not forget the part that, remember, robots, even cars, they wear down over time. Well, our body wears down over time too, but remember, our body regenerates itself, it heals itself. It needs to be able to do that.
Yeah, it needs
to be able to clear itself. So the part of can it think for itself, I think we need to understand the brain and how fully the body works, and then figure out like micro robots or something to create on a robot that would make it do that.